Morality is supposed to guide us, a compass for the soul, a whisper in the dark reminding us of what's right, what's good, what's human. But what if that compass spins endlessly in circles? What if the closer you look, the more it warps? What if kindness wounds and justice breaks and virtue becomes indistinguishable from vice? Welcome to a landscape where right and wrong lose their shape, where every good act casts a shadow, where saving one life might end another, where telling the truth can shatter someone's world, and lying can save it. You've been taught to believe that morality is clear, but morality, like time, like thought, like self, bends when examined too closely. What you'll hear tonight are not riddles and not fairy tales. These are real lived contradictions, paradoxes of compassion and cruelty, sacrifice and selfishness, duty and desire. Each one is simple at first until you try to solve it. Until your mind loops back on itself, wondering if helping was harm, if silence was violence, if goodness was just another mask. And as the hours drift by, you may notice something. That the very feeling of rightness is ... unstable, not broken, not false, but flexible. Molded by culture, by fear, by consequences, by who's watching. Tonight, we'll walk through 25 moral contradictions, not with urgency. Not to win a debate, but slowly, calmly, like wandering through a mirror. Maze where every reflection shows a different kind of good. You won't be tested. You won't be judged. There are no answers. Hear only echoes. So lie back. Let your breath slow. Let the sound of your own heart become background noise. And enter the realm where good intentions fracture, where ethics blur into feeling, and where every decision feels both necessary and wrong. This is not a puzzle you solve. It's a weight you sit with, because sometimes morality isn't a guide. It's a paradox. You've always been taught that justice is the balancing force of the universe, the equalizer, the remedy, a scale that weighs wrong against right and restores the world to something fair. But what happens when that scale swings too hard? What happens when justice becomes its own kind of harm? Imagine this. Someone commits a crime, not a small one, a violent one. Something that left pain, trauma, and scars. The system steps in, as it should. They're arrested, tried, convicted, sentenced, and a collective breath is exhaled. Justice has been served, but rewind. Now, look at the life that led to the crime. A childhood marinated in abuse, a brain wired by trauma. No father, an alcoholic, mother, and a school system that never once noticed the bruises. Was he evil or broken? Now fast forward, he's in prison. 3 years, maybe for life. But his daughter, innocent, bright-eyed, hopeful, grows up without a father. She struggles, gets into trouble. And 20 years later, she ends up in the same courtroom wearing a different badge of guilt. Did justice really stop the cycle? Or did it pass the suffering on like a curse? You start to feel it now. Every time justice acts, it touches more than the guilty. It ripples outward. Punishment meant for one becomes punishment for many. The one who committed the wrong may pay, but so do those who never did. And then there's another side. Sometimes the system gets it wrong. The wrong person goes to jail. Years vanish. Lives are ruined. And by the time the truth comes out, if it ever does, no apology can buy back what was stolen. Yet the system moves on, still calling itself just now. Imagine a different version of justice. One built on healing instead of punishment. One that sits with pain instead of trying to erase it. One where the goal isn't to balance a scale, but to break it. To build something entirely new. But would that still be justice? Or is that just mercy wearing a different robe? You see, the problem isn't just that justice can fail. It's that justice, even when it works exactly as intended, can still cause damage. A man is jailed, rightly, and his family crumbles. A fine is paid and someone loses their home. A reputation is ruined and no job will ever be offered again. And the person wronged, the victim, may still never feel whole. What if punishment can never undo pain? What if justice is not a remedy, but a transformation, one that leaves everyone different, but no one truly healed? And so you find yourself stuck in this loop. To do nothing feels wrong. To punish feels cruel. To forgive feels naive. To understand feels dangerous. And around it spins. Justice creates, and not because it's broken, but because it is built to respond to brokenness. And every response touches more than intended. Every consequence, every attempt at fairness creates a new imbalance somewhere else. So the question remains, is justice a solution? Or just another harm with good intentions? You offer mercy to spare someone pain. You withhold the full weight of justice, hoping that compassion will heal more than punishment ever could. And at first it feels noble, clean, righteous, even. But somewhere in the folds of forgiveness, something else begins to grow. Unintended, quiet, and quietly dangerous. Imagine this. A teacher catches a student cheating. The rules are clear. The punishment is set. But the student is crying. His family is going through something. He's ashamed. He promises never to do it again. The teacher chooses mercy. No report, no punishment. Just a stern warning in a second. Chance. Weeks pass. Another student cheats. Caught the same way. But this time, the teacher enforces the rule. The student is suspended. Her future shaken. Her record marked. And now, something shatters. Because mercy, applied selectively, doesn't feel like kindness. It feels like favoritism. Injustice in disguise. The first student was saved. The second was ruined. And suddenly, mercy, once a balm, becomes the cause of pain. A paradox unfolds. By choosing to reduce suffering, you've created more. Zoom out. A judge lets a powerful man off lightly because of his reputation, his connections, or his potential. He's a good person, she says. He just made a mistake. Years later, someone else, same crime, no power, no status, receives the full sentence. Where is mercy now? Mercy, without consistency, becomes cruelty. But even when it is consistent, another problem emerges. You forgive every time. You choose not to punish again and again. And slowly, those around you stop fearing consequences. Patterns repeat. Boundaries dissolve. And people begin to expect mercy, not as a gift, but as a right. Something earned not by goodness, but by circumstance. Or persuasion. And eventually, mercy doesn't feel like mercy anymore. It feels like neglect. Like cowardice dressed as kindness. Those who follow the rules feel betrayed. Those who suffer injustice feel abandoned. And those who cause harm begin to forget the weight of it. And here you are, trying to do good, trying to reduce suffering, trying to be fair. But somehow your compassion has birthed resentment. Your kindness has created chaos. Your mercy has punished mercy itself, because every act of forgiveness is also an act of omission. You're choosing not to act, and that choice has consequences. You wanted to spare someone from pain, but in doing so, you shifted that pain elsewhere, onto others, onto yourself, and sometimes into the very fabric of what mercy is meant to protect. So now you must ask, is mercy truly good? If its consequences echo as pain? You've always admired the selfless, the ones who give without expecting anything in return, who sacrifice comfort, safety, even happiness for the sake of others. The parent who works 3 jobs for their children, the doctor who volunteers in war zones, the stranger who jumps into icy water to save someone they'll never meet again. But beneath that shimmering surface of virtue lies a question no one wants to ask. What if selflessness is selfish? It begins innocently enough. You help someone, not because you want praise, but because it feels right. You volunteer, donate, listen, support. And you tell yourself, this is who I am. I live for others. I don't need anything back. But here's the paradox. Even that need nothing feeling becomes something you need. Because it feeds you in a different way. It makes you feel worthy, valuable, necessary dot, and now something shifts. The kindness isn't just for them. It's for how it makes you feel. You're not helping to disappear, you're helping to matter dot, it gets deeper. You start to tie your identity to selflessness. You're the giver, the martyr, the one who always says yes. And soon, saying no feels wrong. Rest feels like guilt. Boundaries feel like betrayal. You sacrifice not because the world demands it, but because you do. And so the spiral begins. You give too much. You neglect your own health, your needs, your truth, all in the name of doing good. But the people around you, they begin to notice not just your kindness, but your exhaustion, your resentment, the way you collapse behind closed doors, aching for someone to give you what you won't ask for. Then one day, it flips. You do something for someone and they don't thank you. And it hurts. Why? If you're truly selfless, why does it matter? Because somewhere along the way, your selflessness became currency, an unspoken contract. You expected invisible rewards, love, recognition, peace, in return dot. And now, when those things don't come, you feel cheated. Not because they failed you, but because you built your worth on never needing anything. This is the paradox. You gave everything, not because you had nothing to lose, but because you hoped deep down to gain something sacred, meaning, validation, love, and that makes your selflessness not selfish, but complicated dot. So ask yourself, if helping others makes you feel good, is it truly selfless? Or is every act of sacrifice, no matter how noble, also an attempt to fulfill something in yourself, a longing? To be enough without ever admitting you long at all? You're kind. You choose soft words when harsh ones would be easier. You open doors, you offer help, you forgive easily. You believe in second chances, sometimes third. You try not to judge. You give people room to grow, and you believe, maybe that kindness will ripple outward, that it will heal others the way it has sometimes healed you. But what if kindness isn't always medicine? What if, in the wrong hands, kindness becomes fuel, not for healing, but for harm? God, imagine someone who makes mistakes, serious ones. They hurt people, they break trust, they lie. And every time they do, you respond with kindness. They're trying. You say, they didn't mean to. You give grace. You give space. You give again. And they learn something. Not about goodness, but about immunity. Because your kindness isn't teaching them how to be better. It's teaching them that they don't have to be. They begin to rely on your forgiveness like it's owed. They stop taking responsibility because they know you'll soften the landing. And slowly, your compassion becomes their shield. Not against pain, but against consequence. Now zoom out. A workplace, a family, a community. Someone causes repeated harm, but no one confronts them directly. Everyone is too kind. They avoid conflict. They keep the peace. But in that peace, cruelty festers. Because the silence, the tolerance, the soft smiles, they all say the same thing. You can keep doing this. No one will stop you. And now the paradox blooms. Kindness, meant to protect, now enables cruelty. And cruelty, unchecked, breeds more cruelty. Until one day, someone less kind breaks. They scream, they snap, they say all the things you wouldn't. And suddenly they become the villain, the unkind one. The one who disrupted the illusion of harmony, but maybe they were the first. Honest voice in a room full of quiet lies, and so you begin to wonder, is kindness always kind? If it allows harm to flourish? What if your gentleness helped no one change? What if your patience protects someone else's pain? What if your warmth is smothering someone else's scream? You meant to build bridges, but maybe, without knowing, you built walls instead, walls that kept conflict out. But locked suffering in so now you must sit with this. Kindness can be a balm, but it can also be a blade wrapped in silk. It can soothe or it can stall the reckoning that must come. And in that stall, cruelty thrives. Not because you're cruel, but because you're afraid to stop being kind. You try to be a good person. You try to make good choices. You want your actions to ripple outward with clarity and light, shaping a world where integrity wins and conscience guides. But what happens when your obsession with doing what's right begins to consume the very good you set out to preserve? It starts with small things. You decline shortcuts. You speak up when no one else will. You call out unethical behavior even when it costs you. And people notice not just your character, but your standards. They begin to measure themselves by you and fall short. Not because they're bad, but because you've made goodness look like a high-wire act. One misstep and you fall, and now they resent you. Not because you've failed, but because you haven't. Your goodness becomes a mirror, showing them what they are not. And some respond by pulling away. Others by trying to knock you down, say double down. You try to be even better, stricter, purer. You refuse to bend, to compromise, to let anything blur your moral line. But now something strange begins to happen. The more good you try to be, the more rigid you become. The more goodness you demand, the less grace you give. And the less grace you give, the colder your goodness feels. You start to see people not as they are, but as either good or not good enough. You draw lines, you divide, you correct. You exile Dot and all of it. All of it in the name of good. But now, where's the warmth? Where's the compassion? Where's the humanity? You're no longer fighting for goodness. You're defending a fortress built from your own expectations. And anyone who threatens that vision, even slightly, becomes the enemy. You meant to raise the world. But now you're just pushing it away. This is the paradox. Your devotion to goodness starts embracing the very softness that made you good in the first place. You've turned your values into weapons. You've turned moral clarity into judgment. You've turned goodness into dogma. And maybe, without noticing, you've become the very thing you were trying to resist. Not evil, but unreachable. So now ask yourself, is goodness still good if it makes you unkind? Is virtue still virtue if it disconnects you from others? Or can goodness, pursued too perfectly, destroy the very good it once held? You do what's right, not because it's easy, but because it matters. You hold yourself to a moral code. You follow laws. You follow principles. You tell the truth, even when it costs you. You do the hard thing, even when it's unpopular. You try to be the person who doesn't look away, the one who acts when no one else will. But what if doing the right thing sometimes leads to something worse? Picture this. You see someone steal from a grocery store, just a pack of bread. You report it, the right thing to do, surely. Rules are rules. Theft is theft. Consequences are consequences. But later you find out that man hadn't eaten in 2 days. He wasn't stealing for profit. He was starving. His kids were starving. Now he's in jail. His children are taken into custody. The system kicks in. Everything works exactly as it's supposed to. And yet, it all feels wrong. Because the right thing created a ripple of suffering. And no amount of policy or principle can erase what was lost. Or imagine you speak out against corruption. A whistleblower? Brave. Righteous. And in doing so, you expose real wrongdoing. But your actions also cause panic. The company collapses. Hundreds lose their jobs. Families suffer. Entire lives destabilize. You were right. But your rightness became a spark that lit a fire too large to control. This is where the paradox lives. Doing the right thing doesn't always lead to good. Sometimes it feeds the very thing you were trying to stop. It gives fuel to chaos. It exposes wounds too raw to heal. It breaks systems that were holding people together, even if imperfectly. And so you begin to question, is being right enough? What if the truth hurts more than the lie? What if justice leaves more broken than healed? What if your morality, when applied without context, creates pain rather than peace? Because right isn't always soft. Sometimes it's a blade. And when wielded without nuance, without patience, without care, it cuts more than it cleanses. You don't want to betray your principles. You don't want to abandon what you believe, but now you see it. Sometimes the right choice is also the wrong outcome. So where do you go from here? If right feeds wrong, not by accident, but by design, then maybe morality isn't about always being right, but about learning how much wrongness the world can carry before your goodness becomes its burden. You're told that lying is wrong, a betrayal of trust, a distortion of truth, a slippery slope. But what if a lie can save someone? What if a carefully spoken untruth shields a soul from breaking? What if the most moral thing you ever do is to lie? Picture a child asking if their dying parent is going to be okay. You know the truth, the cold, final, irreversible truth. But you look into that small, terrified face and you say, yes, they'll be all right. And in that moment, the lie doesn't feel cruel. It feels like mercy. Or imagine someone standing on a ledge, seconds from falling. They ask you, does anyone care about me? And maybe no one has. Maybe they've been abandoned, forgotten, left behind. But you say, yes, I do. You not alone? And maybe that lie, soft, trembling, barely formed, is the only thread that holds them to life. So now the question becomes, is the lie wrong if the result is good? But it doesn't stop there, because once you've seen that lies can heal, they start to whisper more often. You lie to avoid conflict. You lie to preserve peace. You lie to protect feelings. You lie to hold people together. And one day, the line between truth and kindness blurs completely. You become the protector, not of reality, but of emotional comfort. And now, people believe things that aren't true. They live in worlds that aren't real. And when the truth finally arrives, as it always does, it doesn't just hurt. It feels like betrayal because it didn't come from the world. It came from you. And so the paradox tightens. A lie can save a moment, but can it save a life? Or does it plant a seed, one that blooms later into confusion, mistrust, or disillusionment? Truth is sharp, but lies are soft like pillows. With stones inside, sometimes you want to protect someone from pain. But what if the pain is the only path to growth? What if shielding them delays their becoming? And what if in lying to protect someone else, you're really protecting yourself from their grief, from their anger, from the discomfort of watching them fall? Now you must ask, is it always immoral to lie? Or is morality itself sometimes a lie we tell to make our kindness feel cleaner than it really is? You were raised to believe that harm is failure, that to hurt someone physically, emotionally, spiritually is a sign of cruelty, recklessness, or weakness. Yet in the quiet corners of the world, something strange happens. Sometimes the only way to truly heal is through pain. You've seen it with the surgeon. The scalpel cuts flesh to save it. They slice through healthy skin to reach the tumor beneath, knowing full well the blood, the agony, the long recovery that will follow. And still, they do it, not because they are heartless, but because to leave the wound untouched is worse. Now imagine this in the moral realm. Someone you love is spiraling. Addiction, self-destruction, denial. You've tried compassion. You've tried silence. You've tried holding space. But none of it stops the fall. And so one day you intervene. You confront. You say the things that make their voice shake and their eyes burn. You force them into discomfort. You force them to face themselves. And it hurts them deeply. They lash out. They call you cruel. They say you've betrayed them. And in a way, they're right. Because in that moment, you've become a source of pain. And yet, beneath that sting is the seed of healing. This is where the paradox unfolds. Can you harm someone ethically? Can you cause suffering with love? We praise tough love. We glorify discipline. We tell stories of warriors forged in hardship, of artists sculpted by pain, of truth revealed only after collapse. But at what point does harm become abuse? At what point does help become control? Maybe you push someone too far. Maybe they break. Maybe they never come back. Maybe your healing wasn't healing at all. Or maybe, just maybe, you saved them by hurting them. And so you walk the tightrope. do nothing, and they sink. Do something, and you wound them. And either way, your hands aren't clean. Because morality isn't just about intent. It's about impact. And impact is messy. So not you. Live with this contradiction. To heal the body, you must cut. To heal the soul, you may need to wound. And in that tension, you begin to question everything. Is pain always a sign of harm? Or is it sometimes the first step towards something whole? And if healing demands pain, then maybe the most loving act of all is the one that breaks someone just enough to help them grow. You're told that selfishness is a flaw, a stain on character. To put yourself first is to be blind to the needs of others, to the greater good, to what's right. You must be humble, generous, willing to serve. But deep down, you start to wonder, what if selfishness isn't the opposite of service? What if it's the root of it? Imagine someone who spends their life feeding the hungry, building homes for strangers, devoting every breath to easing suffering. On the surface, it's pure altruism. But speak to them in the quiet moments, ask why they do it, and maybe they'll tell you, because I can't bear to feel useless. Because it gives my life meaning, because it makes me feel alive. Now, zoom in closer. It was never just about others. It was about the version of themselves they wanted to be. Not evil, not fake. But undeniably, personal. And then look at yourself. You help your friend move, not because you love lifting heavy boxes, but because you want to be seen as dependable. You stay late at work, not just for the team, but to prove your worth. You donate because it makes you feel like you matter. It's not wrong. But it's not selfless either. Not entirely. Because service, at its core, often satisfies something deep inside us. A need to belong, to be good, to feel safe in our own story. So where does morality live in that? If helping others gives you joy, if giving brings you peace, if serving fills a hole in you, is it still service? Or is it self-care with a halo? Here's the deeper paradox. Sometimes the most selfish people give the most, not because they're saints, but because they fear irrelevance. Because control feels better than chaos. Because being needed is their currency. And sometimes those who claim to serve purely for others are just performing, chasing validation, constructing an identity that glows with virtue but hides a void. Now flip it. What if being truly selfish, unapologetically so, gives you the strength to serve better? Because when you're whole, when you've honored your own needs, you give from abundance, not depletion. Maybe service rooted in selfishness isn't a flaw. Maybe it's honesty. Maybe the lie is pretending we serve only others. And the truth is that we serve to survive ourselves. You didn't do anything wrong. You followed the rules. You told the truth. You played fair. And yet, somewhere deep in your chest, something is heavy. It's not shame. It's not regret. It's guilt. But how can you feel guilty when you've done nothing bad? Imagine someone crying, overwhelmed, alone, and you walk past them. You didn't cause their pain. You owe them nothing. But hours later, that image lingers. Their hunched shoulders, the way they trembled, and you think, I could have helped. I didn't. And the guilt arrives. Or picture this. You get a job your friend applied for. You worked hard. You earned it. But they didn't. They needed it more. And now every celebration feels muted. Every paycheck a quiet reminder. You did everything right. But it doesn't feel right. This is guilt without fault. And it lives in the space between morality and emotion. Between truth and feeling, logically that you're innocent. But morality isn't logical. It's human. And being human means carrying burdens that don't belong to you, but feel like they do. Now zoom out. You were born in a place of safety, while others were born in war. You grew up with support, while others were abused. You live freely, while others are imprisoned for existing. And you did nothing to cause this imbalance, but you feel it. That uncheckable weight of luck, of privilege, of injustice that benefits. You didn't build the world this way, but you live in it. And that alone feels like enough to make you complicit. And here the paradox blooms. Is guilt only valid when earned? Or can it emerge from empathy, from awareness, from the unbearable knowledge that others suffer while you survive? Some say guilt is useless without responsibility. Others say it's a compass, a sign that you still care, that you haven't gone numb, but it can consume you. This guilt, it can paralyze you, make you doubt your joy, sabotage your worth, all in the name of feeling moral. And so you ask, can you be guilty without doing wrong? Can you hold sorrow for what was never yours to fix? Or is this just the price of having a conscience in a world full of hurt, to feel the ache of others as if it were your own? You want to help. It's instinct, a hand reaching out, a gesture of care, a need to fix, to rescue, to ease. You see someone stumble and your body moves before your mind does. Because that's what good people do. They help, but what if your help makes things worse? Imagine someone struggling with addiction. You love them. You see their pain. And so you pay their rent, cover their debts, drive them to work, lie for them. You tell yourself they just need stability. They just need time. But months pass and they're still spiraling because they've learned something dangerous, that your help will always be there, that there will be no bottom, no reckoning, no reason to stop. Now, your kindness has become their cage. Or think of a parent doing everything for their child, solving every problem, shielding them from every failure. Years later, that child grows up unable to cope, unable to function. They crumble at the first, a sign of difficulty, not because they're weak, but because they were never allowed to be strong. This is where help becomes harm, because not all helping is healing. Sometimes it's controlling. Sometimes it's enabling. Sometimes it's rooted in your own fear of watching someone you love suffer. And so you swoop in, not to save them, but to save yourself from their pain. It gets even more subtle. You offer advice that wasn't asked for. You fix things that weren't broken. You insert yourself into battles that aren't yours. And it feels noble, like you're doing good, but sometimes help is a thief. It steals growth. It steals autonomy. It steals the dignity of struggle. You think you're relieving a burden, but maybe that burden was theirs to carry. Maybe the weight was the very thing that would have made them strong. And now you must ask, is it still help if it costs them their becoming? Is your support still kind? If it quietly says, I don't think you can do this without me. Here lies the paradox. To help is to love. But love, real love, sometimes steps back, watches them fall, watches them bleed, and trusts that they'll rise on their own, even if it hurts you, even if it breaks your heart, because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can offer is your help. They hurt you. Maybe it was subtle, a cold shoulder, a broken promise, a quiet betrayal, or maybe it was something sharp, something unforgettable, a lie that shattered trust, a word that scarred, a silence that screamed. Whatever it was, it left a mark. And now everyone around you is saying the same thing. Forgive them, not because they apologized, not because they've changed, but because you deserve peace. And so you try. Not because they earned it, but because you're tired of carrying the weight. You whisper forgiveness into the dark. You release them in your mind. You say, I forgive you even when part of you doesn't mean it. But here's the paradox. Forgiveness, given too easily, too freely, too soon, starts to unravel its own meaning. Because what is forgiveness without reason, without remorse, without accountability? Is it compassion or capitulation? Now imagine they come back, not to apologize, but to reconnect. And because you've already forgiven them, you let them in. But they haven't changed. They haven't grown. And so it happens again. The same pain, the same harm. And now your forgiveness has enabled repetition because they've learned they can hurt you and still be welcome back. You meant to let go of resentment. But instead, you've taught them that your boundaries are made of fog. You wanted to be free, but you've chained yourself to a cycle of harm. Or flip it. You forgive, but they never know. You carry it alone. And deep down, that act of grace makes you feel hollow. Because you wanted acknowledgement. You wanted truth. You wanted justice. But all you're left with is silence. So you begin to wonder, is forgiveness truly about freedom? Or is it just a moral performance we're pressured into? They say forgiveness is for you, not for them. But what if you don't want to be okay with what happened? What if the hurt deserves to stay? What if forgetting it feels like betrayal, not of them, but of yourself? And so you ask, can forgiveness be moral if it denies your pain? Can letting go be good? If it teaches others they can harm without consequence? Or is forgiving without reason just another way to be wounded? Quietly, beautifully, forever. Virtue is your compass. Courage, honesty, loyalty, justice. Words carved into your bones like commandments. You want to be good, and not just good, virtuous. Someone who lives by principle. Someone others can admire or follow or trust. But what happens when virtue becomes a weapon? Imagine someone loyal, unwavering, fierce, absolute. They support their leader, their country, their belief system, no matter what. Even when it turns cruel, even when it starts to hurt people, they stay. Because loyalty is a virtue, but now that loyalty isn't noble. It's dangerous. It's blind. It's allowing evil to root itself in the soil of something once pure. Or think of justice. You fight for fairness, for consequences, for accountability. And in doing so, you begin to divide the world into categories. Good and bad, guilty and innocent, worthy and unworthy. And once someone lands in the bad category, they stop being human. You don't listen to them. You don't try to understand. You cancel, you punish, you burn. And all of it feels justified because it's justice. A virtue. But now you've become the executioner, the judge and the jury, and maybe the villain. Here's where the paradox blooms. Virtue, when held too tightly, becomes its opposite. Courage turns to recklessness. Honesty becomes cruelty. Humility becomes self-erasure. Discipline becomes obsession. And goodness becomes domination. You mean well. But you begin to believe that your morality makes you right, always. You stop listening. You stop questioning. Because you're the virtuous one, how could you be wrong? And in that certainty, evil hides, not as malice, but as righteousness. Now imagine two sides at war. Both believe they are virtuous. Both believe they are good. And both destroy each other in the name of virtue. No one sees themselves as evil. No one thinks they are unjust. Everyone is the hero of their own cause. This is the danger. Evil rarely wears horns. It wears robes of virtue, speaks in the language of principles, kills with clean hands and noble words. So now you must ask, is virtue still virtuous when it becomes blind? Can good intentions cleanse violent outcomes? Or does evil grow best when it hides inside what we believe is holy? Truth is sacred. You're taught that from the beginning. Tell the truth. Stand by it. Let it set you free. In a world of illusions and manipulation, truth is the light that cuts through fog. You hold it high. You wield it with pride. But what happens when truth becomes a blade? When sharpness severs more than it saves? Imagine telling someone exactly what you think of them, honestly. Their flaws, their failures, their blind spots. You don't lie. You don't exaggerate. You just tell the truth, but you do it without warmth. Without empathy, without timing, and it doesn't feel like honesty to them. It feels like an attack, because the truth, untempered by compassion, doesn't always heal. Sometimes it crushes. Sometimes it humiliates. Sometimes it drives people deeper into the very darkness you were trying to reveal. Now, imagine a doctor delivering a diagnosis with brutal detachment. You have 6 months, nothing more. No options. Technically true, but without care, that truth is a sentence, not a service. It leaves the patient colder, not wiser. More broken than prepared. This is where the paradox lives. Truth by itself is incomplete because humans don't consume truth the way machines process data. We feel it, and how we feel it depends entirely on how it's given. You see this everywhere. In relationships, in politics, in justice. A truth shouted in rage does not enlighten. A fact weaponized in debate does not convince. An honest critique given without sensitivity doesn't teach. It alienates. And yet, the speaker always hides behind righteousness. I'm just being honest. As if honesty alone justifies the harm, but it DOESN single quotes truth is not just what you say. It's how you say it. And whether the other person is ready to hold it without compassion, truth becomes violence. Not with fists, but with words. Not with lies, but with facts used as blades. And now you must ask, is it still moral to speak the truth? If you know it will cause pain, is a harsh truth better than a gentle silence? Or should some truths be wrapped in kindness, or even left unsaid? Because sometimes the highest form of truth is knowing when it serves and when it only serves you. You do something good, not for reward, not for praise, just for the sake of goodness itself. You help a stranger. You give without hesitation. You offer without expectation. It feels pure, like light passing through glass, unstained, unfiltered. But then something happens. Someone sees you. They thank you. They admire you. They tell others. And now that pure act starts to change. You didn't do it for recognition, but you feel something stir when you receive it. And next time, when the chance comes to help again, a thought flickers. Will anyone notice this time? Suddenly, the good act isn't just about goodness. It's about identity, about being the kind of person who does good things, about being seen that way, and the purity begins to dissolve, not because your intention was corrupt, but because purity, once touched by ego, becomes slippery. Now imagine a world where every good deed is recorded. Likes, views, shares, acts of kindness become content, altruism becomes performance, and people start asking, was it real if they filmed it? And here lies the paradox. The more you try to do good publicly, proudly, consistently, the more tangled your motives become. Not evil, not manipulative, just complicated, because humans are mirrors. We reflect back what the world gives us. And when goodness is praised, we crave more, not of goodness, but of the feeling it brings. You start to curate your morality, to choose the good that looks good, the generosity that feels impressive, the kindness that leaves a glow, and quietly, invisibly, the pure act pollutes itself, because now you're not sure anymore. Was it for them? Was it for me? Was it for how I want to be seen? You meant to be a river, but maybe you became a mirror instead. So now you must ask, can a good act remain pure if you feel tried afterward? Is true goodness silent, secret, unseen? Or is it always shaped, even slightly, by the need to feel good? And if purity cannot survive reflection, then maybe the only truly moral act is the one no one ever knows about. Not even you. You don't want to hurt them. You love them deeply, fiercely, but they've crossed a line. They lied. They broke something. They caused harm to themselves, to you, to others. And now you find yourself standing at a threshold. Do you let it go? Or do you hold them accountable? You choose the latter. Because love isn't blindness. Love has rules. Love has standards. Love demands consequences. So you punish them gently, perhaps, but firmly. You withdraw. You set limits. You impose silence. You draw boundaries. And you tell yourself, this is for their own good. This is how they'll learn. This is what real love looks like. But here comes the paradox. Because what they feel isn't love. It's abandonment. It's rejection. It's pain delivered by the very hands that once held them safe. And now, in their eyes, your love looks like cruelty. Like betrayal wrapped in good intentions. So you explain. You justify. This hurts me more than it hurts you. I'm doing this because I care. And maybe it's true. But truth doesn't erase pain. Nor does love cleanse punishment. It's sting that you see it in parenting. Discipline delivered with hugs. Timeouts softened by lullabies. Because I said so, paired with I love you. You see it in relationships. Ultimatums disguised as care. Withdrawal masked as emotional. Maturity. Correction confused with control. Love punishes but always claims. It's for your benefit. And now you must ask, is punishment ever clean if it comes from love? Or is it more dangerous because it convinces the punished that they deserved? After all, if the one who loves you hurts you, you must have earned that pain, right? And so the cycle begins. They crave your approval, they bend, they shrink. They fear your disappointment more than the consequences themselves. And you, believing you're helping, begin to shape someone not with love, but with fear of losing it. You wanted to guide them, but maybe you're molding them. You wanted to care, but maybe you're controlling. Now the question lingers, can love truly coexist with punishment? Or does punishment, even when kind, rewrite love into obedience? Because if the price of your love is suffering, even if it's soft, even if it's righteous, then maybe love itself becomes the sentence. You've done everything right, followed the rules, made the sacrifices, spoken the truth when it hurt, forgotten pleasure when it felt wrong. You've walked the straight path, even when it twisted through loneliness, struggle, or silence. You've tried every day to be a good person, and yet you feel broken, not because of what you've done, but because of what it's cost you. You watch others lie, cheat, bend the rules, and they seem fine. They're successful. They're smiling. They sleep well. And here you are, carrying the weight of every decision, every hesitation, every moment you said no when you could have said yes. You begin to ask, what did morality buy you? You said no to power, and now you feel powerless. You walked away from comfort, and now you're cold. You told the truth and lost relationships. You refused to cut corners and watched others pass you by. Morality was supposed to protect you, but instead it isolated you. Not because you were wrong, but because you were alone in your convictions. Now think of the whistleblower, the protester, the friend who calls out abuse in their own family. They act morally, and they lose everything. Morality doesn't always reward. In fact, it often punishes. Because the world doesn't run on virtue, it runs on momentum, on compromise, on silence, and morality, pure, rigid morality, doesn't bend. It breaks. And if you don't bend with it, you break too. Here's the paradox. You are moral and miserable. You are just an isolated. You are ethical and exhausted, and still you keep going because you believe in something. Because you can't not, but you wonder, what is morality worth? If it starves the soul, can doing what's right still be right if it leaves you empty? Or is morality just a lighthouse, beautiful from afar, but lonely to live in? You wanted to be good, but now you just want to be whole, and maybe, just maybe, those two things aren't always the same. You make the right choice. Everyone agrees. It was ethical, responsible, maybe even heroic. You did what needed to be done. You followed your conscience, your code, your higher values. And yet, something feels off. Something aches. Someone got hurt. And that's where the paradox begins. Because sometimes doing the right thing means becoming the villain in someone else's story. Imagine, you tell the truth about a friend's mistake at work. You didn't do it to harm them. You did it because it was the right thing to do. People deserve to know. The system needed transparency, but they lose their job. Their reputation crumbles. Their family suffers. And now they look at you not with gratitude, but with betrayal. And you're left holding two truths that don't align. I did the right thing. I also ruined someone's life, or you end a relationship that no longer feels right. You do it kindly, respectfully, without drama. But still, you break someone's heart. They cry, they don't sleep, they spiral, and you wonder, did I do something wrong by doing what was right for me? This is the uncomfortable space between morality and impact, between intention and outcome, because morality tends to live in ideas, logic, fairness, duty, but people live in feelings, in wounds, in memory. And sometimes you're clean. Correct decision leaves behind mess and confusion that no principle can explain away. You were honest, but it destroyed trust. You protected someone, but it violated their independence. You stood up for justice, and someone else lost everything. Now you carried a strange weight of knowing. You acted rightly, and still caused harm. And so you begin to ask, is morality enough if it doesn't leave the world better? Can a right act still be wrong if it breaks someone along the way? Because real life doesn't reward clean logic. It deals in trade-offs, unintended consequences, and unseen ripple effects. You may be right completely, undeniably, and yet what follows may still look like destruction. So where does that leave you? In a space where every right has a cost, and sometimes doing good doesn't feel good. Sometimes being moral makes you the one people fear, because even when your heart is clean, your shadow remains. You give something up, time, money, comfort, maybe even a dream, and people call it noble. They say you've made a sacrifice, that you've put others first, that your act is selfless. But what if deep down the real reason you sacrificed was for yourself? Imagine turning down a lucrative job to stay home and care for a sick parent. Everyone praises your devotion. They call you a good son, a good daughter, a hero. But in your quietest moments, you admit to yourself, I couldn't live with the guilt if I left them alone. You stayed, not just for them, but because you needed to feel whole, to sleep at night. That was still a sacrifice. Or picture someone leaving a relationship. They say, I can't give you what you need. You deserve better. It sounds like love. It sounds like putting someone else first. But what if that goodbye was driven by fear? Fear of intimacy, fear of vulnerability, fear of messing things up later. What looks like sacrifice might just be avoidance with a moral glow. Now, the paradox begins to form. We celebrate sacrifice. We place it on pedestals. Martyrs, saints, soldiers, parents, people who gave it all. But we rarely ask, what did they get in return? Because sometimes giving everything away becomes a form of control or identity, or even pride. You see this in activism and caregiving and leadership. People pour themselves out until there's nothing left, not because they have to, but because they need to feel needed. Their sacrifice becomes their value. Their exhaustion becomes their worth. And what's more, some sacrifices are made to prove something. To punish ourselves, to appear good, to avoid shame, to earn love. And now the question lingers. Can a sacrifice still be noble if it was for your own peace? If you give everything away to feel morally whole, are you serving others or constructing yourself? Sometimes sacrifice isn't surrender, it's strategy. A way to shape how the world sees you. A way to avoid confronting something inside yourself. So ask yourself, is giving something up always moral? If what you gain is invisible, internal, unspoken, maybe the deepest sacrifices are the ones no one notices. And maybe the ones that shine the brightest are the most selfish of all. You made the ethical choice. You followed the rules, honored the principles, chose what would minimize harm and maximize fairness. You didn't act out of impulse or emotion. You paused. You reflected. You did everything a moral person is supposed to do. And still, someone got hurt. Imagine being in a position of leadership. A decision has to be made. One department must be shut down to save the entire organization. You assess carefully. No favoritism, no corruption, just cold logic and ethical responsibility. And so you choose, you lay off 30 people. The company survives. Shareholders are safe. But 30 lives fracture overnight. Mortgages, medical bills, anxiety, and their faces stay with you. You did the right thing. And it still feels wrong. Or imagine breaking up with someone you no longer love. You do it kindly, with honesty. You don't cheat. You don't lie. You sit down and explain gently that it's over, that it's kind of this way. That dragging it out would be worse. But now they're sobbing, lost, angry. Your honesty hasn't spared them pain. It's delivered it. And no amount of ethics can make their suffering disappear. Here's the paradox. Ethics protects your conscience, but not necessarily other people's hearts. You followed the code, the moral framework. But moral frameworks are tidy. People are not. They grieve. They misunderstand. They bleed from truths that were never meant to be weapons. And sometimes your ethical clarity becomes someone else's trauma. You may be praised for your decision. You may even sleep well. But their pain is still real. So what now? Is an ethical action still good if it damages someone? If it leaves them worse off, even as it preserves your integrity? Ethics says, this is fair, but fairness doesn't always feel human. It feels cold, distant, a checklist, not a hand. On the shoulder, and so you ask, is the most ethical path always the kindest? Is the least harmful path truly harmless? Or does doing what's right sometimes mean becoming the villain, not in your own mind, but in the eyes of the people you try not to hurt? You were ethical, and yet they are still broken. You open your arms. You listen. You forgive. You offer understanding to those the world has cast out, the angry, the broken, the ones who don't know how to ask for help without bleeding on others, because you believe in compassion and second chances, in healing over punishment. But what happens when your compassion becomes the very thing that unleashes the storm? Imagine someone who has been violent, unstable, destructive. Everyone avoids them, judges them, but not you. You reach out. You see the wounded child underneath. You offer kindness, trust, and a place at your table. And for a moment, it works. They soften. They breathe. But then they lash out again. And this time, it's worse. Because now they had access to you, to your family, to your safety. And you're left wondering, did I create this? You wanted to break the cycle of cruelty. But maybe your kindness convinced them there would be no consequences. That their pain justified harm. That they could hurt again. And be held again. And now you live in the paradox. Your compassion, the thing meant to heal, became the gateway for destruction. Zoom out to the political. A society opens its doors to those in need without discrimination. A beautiful act. But with it come those who take advantage, not out of need, but out of greed. They exploit the system. They exploit the vulnerable. And now the same compassion that welcomed them becomes the target of anger, of backlash, of violence. And those who once praised your empathy now blame you for the fallout. The paradox tightens. Compassion is not just a soft light. It's a force. And every force has impact, not just on the person receiving it, but on the system it touches. Because when you offer compassion to the dangerous, you risk becoming their enabler. And when you extend it to the unforgiving, you may become the first thing they destroy. So now you ask, is compassion still moral if it leads to chaos? If your understanding opens doors that should have stayed shut? Or is compassion only safe when it's wrapped in distance, in rules and conditions? You tried to be a sanctuary, but maybe they mistook your sanctuary for surrender. You try to be good, not for applause, not for reward, but because it feels right. You hold yourself to a standard. You don't take shortcuts. You don't let yourself lie, cheat, lash out, give in. You resist the urge to say what you really feel when it's ugly. You silence the part of you that wants revenge, or rest, or rage. Because goodness is discipline. Because virtue is strength. But somewhere along the line, you disappear. It happens slowly. You stop speaking up when something hurts. Because you don't want to seem selfish. You stay in relationships that exhaust you because loyalty is a virtue. You work when you're breaking because sacrifice is moral. You apologize when you're the one bleeding because forgiveness is righteous. And bit by bit, your virtues begin to erode the self. They were meant to serve. You become your own judge, your own punisher, your own silent executioner. No one sees it because you still look kind, still generous, still responsible, still good, but you're withering. Because every act of goodness comes at your expense. Because you've confused being moral with being invisible. Because you've learned how to protect others by harming yourself. Here lies the paradox. Your goodness is killing you, not physically, perhaps, but spiritually, mentally, emotionally, you can no longer distinguish between your real needs and your moral performance. You call it humility, but it's actually self-erasure. You call it patience, but it's actually fear. You call it peace, but it's just silence. You've been taught to believe that morality means putting yourself last. But what if putting yourself last eventually becomes not putting yourself at all? Now, ask, is virtue still virtue if it costs you your voice, your truth, your wholeness? Can you truly be good if you no longer know who you are beneath your goodness? You're not immoral. You're not failing. You're just drowning in a sea of shoulds, taught that morality means never choosing yourself. But maybe the most moral act is the one where you finally say, I matter too. You remember the moment, the smile they gave you, the softness in their voice, the warmth in their words when they said, I'm just trying to help. And maybe they were. Maybe they loved you. Maybe they meant it, but still, it broke something in you. Because not all kindness heals. Sometimes it binds. Sometimes it suffocates. Imagine someone doing everything for you. They anticipate your needs. They protect you from failure. They take the burden before you can even feel its weight. And you feel grateful at first dot, but then comes the guilt, the helplessness, the quiet erosion of your own strength. Because every time they step in, you step back. Every time they give, you shrink. And slowly you stop trying. Not because you're lazy, but because kindness has taught you, you can't do this alone. They never said it, but you felt it in their pity, in their overprotection, in the way their help arrived before your own will had a chance to rise dot, and now the paradox reveals. Itself thought their kindness hurt you, not out of cruelty, but out of love too tightly wrapped, too constant, too heavy dot. It made you doubt your resilience. It made you afraid of independence. It turned generosity into dependence. Zoom out further. Think of a culture, a system, a family that's too nice, where no one says the hard thing, where no one allows discomfort, where truth is buried under layers of gentle smiles. And in that softness, people suffocate. No one grows. No one confronts. No one learns to stand up because kindness has made the air too padded to breathe, and now you wonder, can kindness harm when it denies struggle? Is compassion still pure when it prevents someone from becoming? Because there's a form of love that never lets you fall, but also never lets you rise. And maybe the deepest wounds don't come from fists, but from hands that never let go. From kindness that never asked, do you want this? From care that became control. So now you must ask, is kindness still kind? If it costs someone their becoming, or is the truest kindness the one that sometimes steps away? You say nothing, not because you don't care, not because you agree, but because you don't know what to say. Because it's not your place, because it's not the right time, because the speaking might cost you something, reputation, relationships, comfort, peace. So you stay quiet. And the moment passes. You tell yourself, it's not my fight. Or someone else will speak up. Or worse, I don't want to make things worse. And maybe you didn't, but you didn't make them better either. You watched a lie go unchallenged, a cruelty uncorrected, a harm unchecked. And your silence wrapped around it like insulation. That's where the paradox begins. You didn't act. You didn't harm. And yet, you're part of it now because silence in a world of injustice is not neutral. It's a form of permission. It's a background noise that makes oppression feel normal. It's the stillness that gives wrongdoing room to breathe. You remember a time when you saw someone bullied and you looked away. And you still remember that look, the one they gave you. Not asking for a fight, just for a voice, but you were afraid. And so you said nothing, and that absence of speech echoes louder than you expected. Now, zoom out. History is filled with quiet people, decent people. People who didn't throw stones, but also didn't stop them. They told themselves they weren't guilty, but their silence was fertile soil for every horror that followed. This is the agony of moral restraint. Sometimes the most damaging thing you can do is nothing, and yet speech itself is dangerous. Say the wrong thing, and you cause more harm. Speak too soon, and you inflame it. Speak without understanding, and you distort dot, so you live in tension. Silence can be sin. Speech can be violence. And you, trembling between the two, don't know what morality even demands anymore. But still, you know this. When the world breaks, those who say nothing help it stay broken. You do what's expected. You fulfill your role. You honor your promise, your oath, your responsibility, no matter the cost. You put duty above comfort, above convenience, above desire, because that's what morality demands. To be dependable, to be honorable, to follow through, but then someone suffers. Maybe it's you, maybe it's the person you love, maybe it's someone who never even had a say in the first place. Now you wonder, was duty still moral? If it destroyed something human, picture a soldier following orders, not because they agree, but because they swore an oath. They don't want to hurt anyone, but the chain of command is clear. And so they do what they must, and a life is lost, and their soul changes. They fulfilled their duty, and yet they feel stained. Or imagine a parent staying in a loveless marriage for the kids, because that's what you're supposed to do. Because leaving would be selfish. Because their vows were sacred. So they stay. They smile. They sacrifice. And the children grow up in a home heavy with quiet sorrow. And one day, those children say, I wish you had left. Now the paradox unfolds. Duty is supposed to be noble. But what if it binds you to suffering? What if it forces you to betray your own needs, your own truth, your own life? Worse still, what if it demands you betray others? You become the boss who fires people to protect the company. The doctor who withholds comfort to follow procedure. The citizen who stays silent to maintain order because it's your role, your job, your place. And you begin to ask, is morality about doing your duty, even when your heart screams no? Can honoring your role ever be right? If it costs someone their joy, their freedom, their future, duty sounds righteous. But it can also be a cage, a story others wrote that you now live inside. And every time you obey, you disappear a little more. So what is moral? To keep the system intact, or to walk away knowing it will crumble? Because sometimes the moral act is not fulfilling your duty, it's breaking it. You made it through. Not to the end of a journey, but to the edge of understanding, where morality stops being a map and becomes a mirror. You came here looking for clarity. But now you see clarity was never the goal, because morality isn't clean. It isn't static. It isn't a checklist or a scorecard or a rule book tucked beneath the skin. It bends. It folds. It contradicts itself. And somehow, in all its contradiction, it reveals something deeply human. You've walked through the choices that don't feel like choices, where doing the right thing leaves you with guilt, where kindness scars, where silence echoes louder than words, where sacrifice becomes control, where truth untempered becomes harm. You've seen yourself in those moments, haven't you? The times you stayed too long, the times you spoke too soon, the times you gave and it backfired, the times you told the truth and lost someone, the times you did everything right and still broke something that mattered, and yet this doesn't mean you are immoral. It means you are alive. It means you're wrestling with the same tension that lives inside every soul with a conscience. A longing to do good, a fear of doing harm, a realization that sometimes you'll do both at once, because morality isn't about being right. It's about holding the weight of what's right and what's real. It's about making choices without guarantees, loving people who might not love back, speaking when silence is safer, letting go when holding on feels holy. You weren't meant to solve these paradoxes. You were meant to sit with them, to feel them twist in your chest and challenge what you thought was solid. To remember that goodness isn't an answer, it's a question we keep asking over and over until we die. So now, as you close your eyes and let the weight of this strange moral maze settle into your bones, maybe you'll find a strange kind of peace, not from certainty, but from surrender. Surrender to the complexity, to the contradiction, to the truth that being human means being torn and still choosing to care, even when it hurts, even when it breaks you, even when the compass spins and the map runs out. You're still here, still trying, and maybe that in the end is the most moral thing of all.